Hello, friends, and welcome to the fourth installment of The Mouse Says the Butler Didn't Do It, where we are reading from the story of A New Hope Thanksgiving, written by myself, Cheryl Nico Scher, under the pen name of Cheryl Ann Butler. You will find, that the mouse, who is here, will join us every now and then for the reading. Behind me are multiple kitty cats who are currently at their feeding station. You will see them bouncing back and forth. I hope you enjoy their visit. As we left Storm Dokkan, he had been rescued by Silver Ranape, Chris Calhoun, and Graham Calhoun on the start of his journey and escape from a situation with his father, who was now hunting him as he thinks the teenager has something of his involving his illegal businesses. As it turned out, Storm, along with his dogs, became vitally sick as he raced downhill to escape his father. He woke a few days after to find himself at the Crystal Heart Lodge in bed and breakfast with the family of Manduala, a group of friends that were that of his grandmother. We now rejoin him as they have talked about the ghost in the area, and he has spoken of seeing the hitchhiker and hearing the voice of his late grandmother, Ranella Papadopoulos, who told him to continue on. This is now leading into Chapter 12 of A New Hope Thanksgiving. On Monday morning, November 20th, Storm came downstairs to the dining hall of the Crystal Heart Lodge in bed and breakfast to find Silver and several men gathered around the table of a large dining hall. Happy Boone, retired Lieutenant Commander Michael McMichaels, Hutchins O'Flanagan, Patrick Walker, Tsar and Rasputin Khrushchev, and Reverend Father John Pales. Morning, Storm. Chris Calhoun set the last plate of food on the sideboard. Do you want orange juice or tomato? Good morning. Orange juice, please. I got that, Uncle Chris. Arena Khrushchev poured the juice to set it at the place setting next to Silver at the large square table and circled the others. Dead grandfather, she spoke Russian, then translated to English as she spoke to Rasputin. Do you or Dea Tsar, uncle, need more orange juice? Yet, sweetheart, Tsar smiled, but we could do with another cup of your twins' delicious homegrown and dried black teas from the samovar. Ileana came around the table to take other the Pasternaks, the Russian tea holders, to fill them with a small amount from a minuscule teapot, then the hot water from the huge copper water steamer, and return them to their places. That thing caught Storm's attention as he looked up and down it. there was a memory just out of reach, but it was there. Storm chewed his lower lip as he stared at it. Silver followed his gaze. It's a Russian water steamer, and the tea in the tiny pot is so strong that it needs to be diluted by the hot water from the steamer, or it'll eat your belly, Tsar responded. The Russians like their tea very hot and strong, son. That beast is authentic. It was purchased as a gift for your yaya by the Khrushchev's papa many years ago. When you were little, it was kept on a cart to keep your curiosity from getting you burned, and it was kept locked in Chris's pantry. Silver drew Storm's attention. Son, how's your arm? You go make yourself up a plate, or if the young ladies will, you'll get a big surprise. And they are used to feeding their younger brothers. It's going to be a long day for you. You have to register for school, then you have classes. The young ladies are a grade ahead of you, and Rasputin's grandson, Ilya, is a grade behind. To be honest, Dad, it hurts, but not as bad since I got home. It's the weather, but I'll be okay, and I think I remember. I may have been... No, it wasn't. I think it was. It wasn't you, but did someone drop that piece when they were polishing it and get hurt? Chris laughed. He's remembering the Iz Man, your Wizard of Iz. It sounded like Big Ben when it dropped. It echoed throughout the mansion, and Izzy broke a toe. Storm took a plate as the men chuckled. At least he survived. Unlike every damn time you turn around, that ex-Eagle Avante Maddox has got something wrong with that big-ass toe of his. Hut drew a round of laughter with the men over the Eagles' former defensive player that suffered from turf toe throughout the season he had played with them, and was called out by the podcaster on YouTube they all followed by the handle of Philly 500. The front door opened. Storm heard the door ease close. A huge blonde teenager with midnight blue eyes entered the dining hall. Over 6 feet, he had to be tipping the scales at over 200 pounds. His long hair was pulled back, but had escaped the tie. Dad, Uncle Chris, Graham needs to tell Papaw Sydney, we have a mama owl and owlets that need some extra straw. The nest is on the trail 4 near the old grist mill. There were some mouse bones that led me to her. He brushed his hair from his eyes. Shower, then you have a refresher. We'll introduce you, and then PayPal. When PayPal gets here, you tell him. You know he will take care of it. Takes care of all the animals out here that are in the wild. Excuse me. He bowed his head to the table to leave the dining hall. The look on Storm's face had a round of laughter coming from the men and the twin girls. I'm sorry for staring. Storm put eggs, bacon, and a piece of sausage on his plate, then set it down. Ilya? Did you say his name is? Yes, Silver answered, and took a drink of coffee. Okay, if he's a grade behind me, he's 14, right? 2 weeks ago. He just turned, Rasputin, his grandfather smiled. Storm couldn't help it. He glanced over his shoulder and looked back at the man who just spoke, as the boy walked down the hallway. He's big. He's 6'6.5" tall and 238 pounds. Czar sipped his tea and hasn't hit his growth spurt yet. When that happens, he may be bigger than my Salazar. He chuckled and fist bumped his younger brother. He's varsity heavyweight on the 8th grade wrestling team. Rasputin bit into his toast. Our younger brother also is a fantastic drummer. He plays in orchestra and is the drummer for a rock band. Arena plays lead guitar and I play bass. Our younger brother, Dinos, plays keyboard, and our baby bro, Baby J, plays a kick-butt electric fiddle with us. Ileana explained. Do you want tea? Please. She took his cup. He also, Father John smiled, works in Beethoven's Fifth music and gives drum lessons with Ricky Ratty, who's also known as our JJ. Now, wow, he does a lot of stuff. Thank you. He looked up at Ileana as she set his tea down. You're welcome. She looked up as her brother came down the hallway. You need to eat after your run. Put your plate together, and one of us will get that wild mop of yours under control, as Mama and Buzia would say. That head of yours is uncontrollable, as was Papa's and Ded's in their younger years. My brother still fights with that head of hair of his every day. And ask your great Bubby, do you know how many times she or I got a call? Czar chuckled, then imitated his brother. I had a comb stuck. Come help me before I grit my eye out. Last time that happened, you schmuck, was 5 years ago. It broke off in those waves, and Somia couldn't get it loose. You will just not let me live that down, will you? Yet, it was Russian Christmas, and took us 2 hours to get that piece of plastic loose from those locks of yours. Rasputin leaned over and punched his older brother in the arm. Like that hurt me. A Russian Jewish bear. Bah! As Papa would say. They high-fived each other. I will, Ilya laughed and sat down. Yet, you're not playing games with your diabetes. Dead? Ileana looked at their grandfather. Did you take your medicine, your insulin? Rasputin raised an eyebrow. Or do I have to leave Nana beg Aunt Sonny and Stevie contact your Bubby Solo and Mama Natalia? Yet, don't do that. I did my blood sugar prick and my injection and put the needles in the sharp box in Uncle Graham's office to keep he keeps there for me to keep the children and animals safe. I also told him about the Mama Owl, so he knows. And when PayPal arrives, if we are at school by then, Graham will tell him. He looked at his sisters. Can I start with some milk? Irina smiled. Da. Ileana poured a glass for him and one for Storm. Thank you, they said in unison. Ilya took a drink, then stood to make his plate. Rasputin looked over as the teen sat down, then stood to step to where his grandson sat at Storm's and Silver's table. You need more fruit and less bread. Otherwise, meh is good. The The mama and the grandma would be proud. He removed 2 slices and left the biscuits for his gravy. Thanks, Dad, Ilya said as one of the twins placed a small cup of fruit next to his plate. He glanced up. Thank you. Welcome, she smiled. This is Storm. Uncle Silver and Aunt Emily are foster caring for him. He's Yaya Poppy and Papu Theo and Mima Ranella's their grandson. Sorry to say it, but he got stuck with Reed as his father. Ilya sat back and looked at him. Sorry to hear that. He was an idiot when it came to the family and to Uncle Graham. But I think I remember you. G.I. Joe. Yeah, we used to play with Harley and Scout, and Uncle Graham would watch and keep an eye on us when we had play days. He nodded. Nice to meet you again. You were always just you, he shrugged. You never took after Reed. You were always cool. Very cool that you're home. Glad to have you here. Welcome back, and I hope you stay this time. Storm blinked back tears as he looked at him. Thank you, he choked out. I do remember you, but it's a hit and miss in memories. Would you 3 mind if we could talk later on? In which case, my sisters or the men haven't explained. Da, spelled D-A, means yes. Niet, N-E-T, means no. It's Russian, and sometimes they forget not everyone outside Manduala, not that you are an outsider. It's been a while since you've been here, that's all. But some folks that don't speak our family's tongue don't know that. And the supposed Russian that Sean Connery spoke in The Hunt for Red October, it was close. It wouldn't have made it in a bar with Doxy Din as a bartender. He would have got bounced like Ilya and Dima in their short video on their YouTube channel. It was high school gibberish, although good, and the pronunciation was close. The dialect was off, though. If you haven't lived with an authentic member of the Russian Communist Party, you wouldn't know. There's some of Uncle Silver's and Aunt Gilly's and Peggy's native Arapaho used, especially when Uncle Izzy loses it or the Eagles got jobbed by a bad call from what we call the zebras or referees. He looked at Hut. Uncle Hut throws some Gaelic out there when it comes to some stupid stuff the Brits have done in Northern Ireland, or now when one of us gets ticked off about Ukraine or Israel with the stuff they've had to deal with. And no one wants to make the statement that they are defending themselves after they were the ones who were attacked on October 6th. Several years ago. They are not the instigators, and if Hamas would have helped their people instead of diverting the funds to for medical care, food, and situations into plans or welfare and weapons, then the Palestinian people would not have needed to go into Israel for jobs, food, and medical that Hamas did not provide for them. He slammed his fist on the table as he blew out a breath. Sorry, we're Russian, Ukrainian, American-born Jews. Israel means a lot to me. He thumped his massive muscular chest. None of us like to cuss in front of the little ones. But sometimes you gotta let it all hang out, like our great Bubby always says. Okay, I agree with every statement you just made. Putin has no right in Ukraine, and if Hamas wanted to work for their people, why didn't they set up their government operations to take care of their people in the Gaza Strip and help them and not stockpile weapons, as this was a planned attack that obviously took several months or over several years to do, when the money could have gone to take care of their people and not have the Hamas idiot chieftains living in their big, beautiful homes while their people scavenged in the street for food and clean water. And then they hid those weapons in children's hospitals and schools and daycares. Dad Silver did kind of forget to mention that you all speak fluent Russian. That is so cool, though. Thank you. And I'd like to learn it so I could understand, and you all won't have to explain when you say something that isn't English. If you'd be willing to teach me, I think it would be really cool. I totally get that and agree with you and your great Bubby about sometimes you gotta let it all hang out. The lady said you have a band, though. What do you call yourselves? Storm started to eat as he looked across the table. The men around the table started to cough, then chuckle, with Rasputin giving a belly roar as he sat down. Irina and Ilyana stepped to each side of Ilya and placed a hand each on his shoulder. As one, the three stated, "Screw Putin." Storm half choked. See what they mean? Their grandfather chuckled. Silver patted Storm on the back. "Okay there, son?" He coughed several times, having tears come from his eyes, and mopped the table where the milk came spewing out of his nose as the teen smiled. "It's in honor of Bobby. Her name was Soloma Sevadasko before she married Dad. Her family came from Bakhan, Ukraine. She was born there when it was behind the Iron Curtain. They escaped when she was 2 and arrived here in time for the 4th of July. 4 years later, she met Dad in Hebrew school. They attended together for years, then made their bat and bar mitzvah together, started dating when they were still in high school. When they graduated and married, she went to Bucks County Community College and he went into the Army. But before he shipped out, Dad became a reality. Ilya started to eat. "Our only child," Rasputin smiled. "When 9/11 happened, he was already a Marine. He went in for the GI Bill. Roman married 18 years ago, a wonderful woman, a Russian Jewish bride who came from Moscow named Natalia. So beautiful, like my Solo. And my granddaughter's here." He waved to the twins. "Then these Chekta, Russian, means beast or rugrats. Komanakbak in Ukraine." He leaned forward with a smile. "They entered our world and our hearts one at a time. We lost Roman in an attack on the Marine base in the mountains above Kandahar, even as Colette's Ruzi tried to save him, and so did another friend who is Afghanistani and served in their military, but is now here to raise his family." Rasputin inhaled deeply to settle himself. Before everything happened here again, it happened worst. Before his death, Natalia found she was pregnant with baby Jay. Our youngest grandson was born after he had passed. He is named Roman Maxim Jr. as he was born. When his mama was going to pick up diapers and formula for him a week after his birth, the big man sighed. It hurts my heart still to this day and will forever, I fear, as she became our daughter and called us Papa and Mama, and had none of her own. He shook his head and placed a large hand on his heart. I will tell, my brother. Natalia was returning, and a large buck ran in front of the car. Yes, we have deer. We have some elk. No moose, thank goodness, though. Not wanting to hit the animal, the woman who was coming in the opposite directions, whose car it ran in front of, she turned to avoid, but came into our Natalia's lane, and to not be hit head-on, our Natalia tried to go to the shoulder of the road. The other woman panicked and swung the wheel the other direction, and lost control as she hit black ice and was sliding. She cut the wheel once more, we think. Natalia was fully stopped and off of the road when it happened, and could not go nowhere, as she was T-boned by this other woman's car. It killed them both instantly. Irina fled the hall. Ilyana dropped her head. Ilya repeatedly blinked and said something under his brush that sounded like it may be Russian or Hebrew, as it was a prayer. Tsar placed a hand on Rasputin's shoulder. We will get through. Won't we, children? Rasputin blinked. We were watching the Rugrats that day, and Desiree, my wife, received the phone call from Solo. Tsar shook his head. She loved these babies and Roman. Such a sad, sad time. Rasp and Solo then raised the children, as any good, loving grandparent would do. One thing to say here, Rasputin raised a finger. Our comrades and their wives were there always. Rasputin raised his tea in a salute to all around the table. Bubby passed due to COVID 6 weeks after Tatia Desiree, Ilyana explained, as Irina returned. And when Putin, Ilya smiled, went and invaded Ukraine, we lost it, and we wanted to call ourselves F. Putin and the Kremlin. Ilyana wiped her nose on a paper napkin, and she took from the buffet table. But Bubby and Mama and Tatia Desiree would have thought that too vulgar for us, as the well-raised children by them, and too disrespectful of Mama's homeland, because it's not the people. It's the asses that run the country from the Kremlin and their president. Yes, vulgar, like him. Even the vulture in the old Cold War cartoon with Bugs Bunny our Mama used to laugh at and do his voice for us when she read stories, is sweeter and more cuddlier than himself sitting on his throne over there. May he fall into the commode his butt sits on and goes kersplash. How could anyone think they would want to cuddle with that? He could never be as cute and cuddly as that dear vulture. Irina shuddered. I'm really sorry. Storm shook his head and dropped it as he stood. Son? Silver rose as Graham entered the room. Graham froze, then stepped forward over to Storm and whispered, I got you. He put his arms around the teen. Let it go. We're here for you. Storm let go of the sob to take in several deep breaths and tried to steady himself. I'm sorry. I didn't think this would... I'm sorry. It just hit me. But she's dead. I don't think Raphael would ever claim my mother's body. I know damn right well Reed won't. She's probably going to be buried in an unmarked grave in a pauper's field somewhere because there will never be a funeral, and I won't even know where she's at. Silver rested a hand on Storm's shoulder. Phones came out around the table. Pat dialed Dakota, stood and stepped away. Chris was talking to Jim, his oldest son, as he headed for the kitchen. Father John called his oldest daughter Cricket. Her husband, Richie Allman, was a police detective, and turned from the table. Silver looked at Happy. Call Garble. I want him, Caleb, and Tony to look into this. Find out where her remains are being held. She needs to be where he knows her resting place is at. If anything, it's Arapaho. If they don't want to deal with it, we'll bring her home to at least rest in New Hope so that he knows where he can visit her. Hap gave a nod and placed a call as he leaned against the buffet. Hot sat forward at the table and looked to Silver as Graham turned Storm in his arms to tell him, it's okay. It's no shame for a man to cry. She was your mother. It hurts. No matter how much was screwed up in her life, and I've known her for years, yeah, there were things that were screwed up in her life. For whatever reason it may have been, no matter the whens and whys, and the wheres and hows. She was your mom. It's okay to let that hurt out. Storm rested his head on Graham's shoulder and slowly got himself back in order to sit down with Graham standing behind him and still resting his hands on the teen's shoulder. Hut rubbed the side of his face. Do any one of us have the slightest idea where Phil Pickler or Michelle Dokkan may be? Or is that wishful thinking? We all know where the crazy nutcase Jesus freak is. She's right here in our midst. We all have to put up with that one. Mac drummed a finger on his coffee mug. He went AWOL when she told him she was pregnant. He's always had a drinking issue from the disco bombing in Germany when he was in the Army and Special Forces there. After he came home from being let go by the Rams, and it got 10 times worse when he lost his brother in that plane crash. Saw him, must be over 10 years ago, or more. Stevie's 12th birthday. Sonny brought her to San Diego for us to celebrate, and Jess and Dan brought Mickey. The month he finalized for divorce with Tammy because of her jeopardizing the baby's life, and the charges being brought against her over trying to poison him with that tang. Mick was, I don't know, a month, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, maybe 3 months old. In between there, we were up in L.A. Your old haunted Hollywood trip, Zara nodded. When my goddaughter scared the hell out of you by telling you that an Asian lady was dead nearby and she wanted her body found to be sent home. She wanted to go home to the cold of the North Pole, and that 2 of the spirits of the dead didn't want Stevie near a hotel called Searstill because bad things had happened there. That on the top floor of it, was it not, Mac? There were ghost hunting for the breakfast killer, as I recall. He picked up his hot tea and crooked his head towards Mac, and others were looking for his evil follower, his worshipper. Mac took a deep breath. Valentine's Day of that year. We were at the Nickel Diner. It's closed for good now. It was in the 500 block of South Main Street. We were having breakfast after visiting friends in Little Tokyo. She wasn't wrong, just interpreted things in a 12-year-old way and was just developing those points of her gifts. Storm took a deep breath. I don't understand. Does this have something to do with Kathy's father? He leaned back and could feel Graham's strength and support as the man stood behind him. Max scrubbed his face. The last time I saw Phil Pickler, who is supposed to be your mother's father, was Valentine's Day, about 11, 12, 13 years ago. Sorry to be the one to have to say this to you, son, but Philip Pickler was one of the local population of Skid Row on South Main Street in Los Angeles, California. He's an alcoholic or drug addict, Storm asked. Alcohol, but it's possible that he got hooked on something else. 2 days later, after Sonny took the girls home, Jess, Dan, and I went back down there to see if we could offer him help. Dan was even willing to offer him a place at his home in the carriage house to get him home and get him help. And I told him we could get him into a program and that John and Graham worked with AA and NA at the worship center here at the inn. After all, he was once the friend from school. I, along with the men gathered around here, still consider him a brother. He's been part of Manduala all his life, and he was a lion, a brother. He looked around the table once again. The men ended their calls to take their seats and nodded in agreement. One of us. He was our kicker-punter. He wasn't there when we returned. I was told by several of the people that the police were asking questions about a missing female college student that was a tourist from Canada. A lot of those down there took off, Phil included. I put the boys on a plane at LAX that afternoon and went back to San Diego for deployment. Max shrugged. I understand about remembering your daughter's birthday, but what's with the dates? I don't get what went on. Silver rubbed Storm's shoulder. Remember I told you about Madame Begetta, Madame Sonia, and Mademoiselle Stefiana? He looked to Silver. The psychics. They share the witch shop building. They have the top floor and work sometimes with Mom Emily. Kinda right, Graham chuckled. Sonny owns part of that building, the upper floor. Your grandmother sold it to her when she sold the bottom part of the building to Emily. The lieutenant commander there is married to Sonia, and Stefiana is his daughter. Sonny and Stevie, and they are for real. He emphasized each word in the last statement. The real deal, the Rasputin nodded. That restaurant is a block away from the Cecil Hotel. Sears Stills. Storm stared at him. So what does... Just listen a moment. You'll learn more about the family. Graham bent to whisper into his ear, then took a seat next to him. Storm nodded as Chris poured his son a cup of coffee. We went looking for Phil on February 16th of 11. I think it was years ago. I think that was years ago. What my daughter tuned into was the Cecil Hotel, a block away from where we had breakfast. In the mid-1980s, Richard Ramirez, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, a serial breakfast, as she thought of it, as in cereal like Captain Crunch, killer of at least 13, lived on the top floor of the hotel for $14 a day. The ghosts of those he murdered were hunting for him on the top floor. Followed by, in 1991, an Austrian serial killer, John Jack Underwagner, who had committed murder in West Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. He was convicted in 1974 of one murder. He became a writer in prison. He fooled people into thinking he had rehabilitated. He was paroled in 1990 and came to the U.S. because he was hired to write for a magazine. He heads to L.A. and to the Cecil Hotel because of his fascination with Ramirez. The magazine had sent him to do a report on prostitution and deaths of the victims that had taken place. Well, as it turned out, he was the follower or worshiper of Ramirez that Stevie had picked up on. Within 1 year, 1991 through 92, he had killed several more. I think the count was 11 sex workers while living at the Cecil and dating the hotel's manager. He was arrested in February of 1992 in Miami as he tried to leave the country. February 29th of our visiting year, 1 day less than 2 weeks after I went looking for Phil with the boys, the news broke that the young woman who was reported missing was found dead in the water tank on the rooftop. She was of Asian descent, a tourist and college student with mental issues from Canada, and this was only after residents complained of poor water pressure, brown tinted water, and the water having a smell and tasting off. Oh, that's gross. Storm swallowed hard. Please say you don't think he had anything to do with her death or her murder or whatever. Storm looked at him as he shuddered. No, I actually think seeing my Jess and Dan made him realize that his daughter was only a few years younger. And when I told him about you running around Mystic Moments and the B&B with your great-grandpa in and out of the studio and learning about the trails when you hiked with Ranella and Beastly, and Chris took you fishing and being buds with the man sitting next to you, Chris and Ethel's Graham, he freaked. Storm looked from Chris to Graham. Uncle Chris, I saw you fishing in early October by the boat launch. Chris blinked. Shit. Silver, I told you about the kid with the camping gear. Yes, you did, Silver admitted. and I went on one of my runs with Beastly but couldn't find him. Graham blew out a breath. Beastly? Wait a minute. He was a huge puppy that I played with. He was my grandmom's, wasn't he? Where's he at? Graham dropped his head and just shook it. He's gone. Storm, I'm sorry. We lost him. Storm dropped his head and sat there quietly for a few moments. He was my best friend when I was little. He wiped a tear. Mac nodded. He was a best friend to all of us, including Graham. Sorry, but I gotta continue on with this and let you know what I know, son. Phil was just sober or going through Jones's or DT's enough to recognize me and understood how long it had been since he'd been in New Hope. He had missed his daughter's entirety of her life by that time, and that he had a grandson, you. I think he didn't want to face any of it. As for Michelle Dokkan, no idea. She stayed on the fringes. She would only deal with Manduala, and that took a lot on her queen's part. That girl was always looking for money. You do have an older aunt or uncle on that side. She put the baby up for adoption back in the late 70s. I think it was when that happened, but not sure. Thereabouts, though. And your grand got her a housekeeping job in the area, but I don't know. There was something. Mac took a drink of his coffee. Rasputin nodded. I dated Michelle for about a month in 10th grade. We were too young for anything but a movie, burger, and shakes. She always wanted more. It seemed as if she was always looking for some type of constellation for love. She was needy. I told her no, we were too young. I mean, I was barely 16. She was 15, if that. When she realized we were Jews, my family, you see, well, it didn't turn out good. The Queen backed her off until one day Solo eventually decked her for something she'd said or did. I never got the full answer on that. It was a teenage girl thing. But Solo always did have a nasty left hook, just like those two standing over there by the Samova. They take after their bubby. He nodded to the twins, who were his granddaughters. Yeah, don't get them pissed together. One is bad enough. Both will kill you, Ilya smiled. Father John raised a hand. Yeah, John. Chris was now refilling cups with coffee, and the girls did the same with tea. You know we will, Ilyana winked and raised a fist. Irina kissed her left knuckles. John grinned. If you all remember, as I do, Michelle quit school at age 16. And yes, it was because of the pregnancy. A pregnancy of that baby, and yes, she did place it up for adoption because she created the issue with that new school teacher. What was his name, guys? Do any of you remember? He stroked his chin. David Manikowski, Chris smiled. He denied it all, and then a year later, he resigned when Papa Franklin and the old man Calhoun confronted him at the Christmas party because he made a move on my Ethel the night of the bonfire before Thanksgiving break. Yes, By golly, you're right, Playbook Man. When that child was born, they didn't go for a paternity test. She just gave it up, and he was gone. John reached for the creamer. However, and this is of interest, that trailer she later moved into when she and her mother got into it, and she basically took off as two likes don't always get along, and her stepmother and father told her they wouldn't tolerate any problems. The first time after that baby was adopted, and I don't exactly know what happened. Maggie May probably would, as she's the wife of a chaplain, and all the gospel that goes on with that position dribbles down to her. She would know. I do know she bounced from one housekeeping job to another housekeeping job. It did belong to Manikowski. She had Kathy there, and then lived there until she took off with Eric the day after Ranella took custody of Storm. As I remember, the first pregnancy was when she started to work for different families and carry gossip. Oh, yes, she did. Pat covered his coffee cup. Chris, you'll have me in the John as it is for half the day, my brother. I'm good. Old iron kidneys has turned into tin, Chris laughed. Mine did that a few years ago. 3 cups of coffee is my limit when I'm in that kitchen. Chris patted his shoulder. She played the field for the next several years and bounced from house to house as she wore out her welcome. When she settled in that house in Yardley Gardens estate, Hutt looked at Chris. No, I'm thinking of someone else. The one that went after you, Chris. Buffy Maytag Berkshire, cheerleader for the friggin' Redhawks. She's still at it. Every friggin' time she sees me in town, whether Effie is with me or not, she'll make sure my Redsie isn't in hearing distance, especially after the last time. And that last engagement on the battlefield that left her come out of the battle at the colonist 1, British 0, and then when she's sure it's all cleared on the battlefront, I wind up in the middle of a guerrilla warfare, and it starts all over again. It's like she can't take no for a God's damned answer. The last time it happened, she advanced on the battlefield. She advanced on the battlefield too quickly, and she wore Ethel's Starbucks iced latte when she unexpectedly came around the corner wanting me to look at a kitchen composting unit in the kitchen shop. Chris busted out laughing and had to cover his mouth to keep from spraying everyone with the coffee he had just taken a sip from. My Redsie still has the moves she did all those years ago, and being raised the youngest in the family of 7 siblings, the other 6 being male, and having to put up with Pop Franklin's older half-brother's ass whelp's family, she's got a take no prisoners attitude. Her brothers taught her that as well as what she could do and how to box, wrestle, and blitz like you ain't ever gone against in the front line. Christ, Chris. Happy shook his head. Last Thanksgiving, she lined up against me, the freaking center for the Lions' offensive line. State freaking champion and all-state player all those years ago in the family touch game, and put me on my belly and ran me the hell over to get to you. Happy smiled. Okay, only sack I ever enjoyed, Chris smiled. Anyway, 6 weeks ago, Ethel saw a countertop composter and thought it'd be good for the pantry instead of having me running buckets out to the compost heap or to the chickens. With the fact that's usually when that goofball ram, so Gaiety Guy, has just managed to figure his way out of the goat pen and gets into the heap at least once a friggin' week. She was right. Before I could react and stop her, my woman, after the bath of iced coffee, stuffed the buffinator's head into a trash barrel and dumped it over her damn head. It took Mama Licorice to call Emily for help and backup to calm her down. That red head of hers is no lie when she gets pissed off. But yeah, Michelle worked for them for the longest, up until she took off with Eric. Then followed Buffy Maytag into the marriage with Dr. Lowell Berkshire and moved to housekeeping in Yardley. He set his coffee back on the plate. But I'll tell you this, she did a drum solo on that trash can that our Ricky would be proud of. Before she got involved with Eric, she played the field. Then, when Phil came out of the NFL, Czar looked around the table. Wait a moment, Uncle Czar. My grandfather played in the NFL? Storm looked at him. Chris nodded. Yes, Phil came back from losing the spot to the Rams. He was already in trouble with the bottle, and it got only worse when Dalton was killed in that flight to Mexico City. But they didn't date for long, and she had other guys. When she turned up pregnant and was living in that trailer, that's when he took off. He couldn't hold it together. You're right, she had Kathy in that trailer, and he was gone like he'd been shot out of a cannon. Never even saw the girl. Chris took a seat next to Graham. But, Dad, we need to tell Storm. Uncle Phil was one of the other soldiers with Uncle Czar and Uncle Rasp that marched Putin out of Germany and then survived the disco bombing within several months. He was wounded and came back with only part of his foot. He tried out for the Eagles and was on the team, then was traded to the Rams and played 2 years with them until his release. And he came home to here at the inn with Papa Sidney and Aunt Emily's brother-in-law, Mr. Sexton, and his maple syrup farm. Then came Uncle Dalton's death in the plane that was hit by a terrorist flying to Mexico City. When she got pregnant, she told him she didn't know if the baby was his. She had like 5 or 6 guys she was going to have tested. The only one who wasn't was Uncle Phil because the stress was overwhelming and he lost it. Graham looked at Storm. Not his fault on that type of shit. If he would have had someone set up like Father John has with AA and NA, it may not have happened if he got the help like I did from all of you. So I might not be Phil Pickler's grandson. Storm looked around the table. What does Graham mean about the help he got? Storm wondered. Graham's right. If I could have gotten the approval and it was set up instead of a half-assed shit that was going on in Yardley at the time, I think we could have kept our brother from spiraling in that way and down in that direction to where he sunk. That's debatable about you being his grandson, Storm. We all hope so, because the others, let's put it this way, Phil was a very brave man. What came down on top of him with all he'd gone through, and more with his parents, would have overwhelmed any man. But the others she ran with, 4 of the 5 are, well, the list. Prison for rape, prison in Mexico as part of the cartel, warrants for murder in 3 states, prison for breaking and entering, rape, murder, and a state representative in Donald Von Thornton W's father, Mac stated. Storm looked at them. Dad, did you tell Uncle Chris's Jim and Dakota that he's been beating on Tootie and something went down that night before she got me? She mentioned Paul or something being with Thurston W. at her place and something about her little sister and one of them hitting her baby brother. Graham was out of the chair in an instant, the tremors running through his body. What? Dad, I bet that's... Paulie boy is a junkie, and calm down, you're shaking. I bet you're right. And we did tell Jimmy and Coda. They're looking into it, but Bristol Borough is not their jurisdiction. Sit, please. When he did sit and pick up his cup, his hands trembled. I owe that girl an apology if what's happened that I think happened and it's been going on. She doesn't know that you bitched about her. Send her a bouquet of flowers from Aunt Lily Anna's and the dogs. It will be a surprise for her, Chris said. The smile that crossed Graham's lips was slightly evil and pissed him off at the same time. Let him try it again. I'm in protect mode. Chris smiled. That's our Coven's hub. Back to this. Michelle swore to Ranella your mother was his, and she borrowed money from her, and it was never paid back as far as I know. As for her, after Kathy turned you over to Ranella, Poppy, and Theo, when Kathy up and married with Will Clark, Chris raised a hand. This is going to hurt, Storm, but I gotta say this. Will really loved her. All she was after was what money he and his family could bring in. Storm nodded. I know that. Will was a good man. I'd like to see him again and tell him thanks at least. Chris gave a nod. Will Clark, then the business, she almost had him lose, along with his father's nonsense. That had the roof cave in because his father was accepting stolen copper and Will couldn't keep the house. He had to sell it to keep Peacock Recycle afloat, and they moved into the apartment over his grandparents' garage and into one after another. Don't know why on that. Uncle Chris, every apartment we had, she worked out of. It wasn't legal, and Will knew nothing about it. He was no longer a viable source for a house she wanted. She once said Chicky, Madonna, and Candy, she once said to Chicky, Madonna, and Candy, the only reason she wanted Will was because he had a house. Storm blew out a breath. Sounds about right with both of them. Michelle realized she wasn't going to receive the state funds for a single parent anymore, especially not twice over, and in debt up to her eyeballs. She owned her own parents had divorced years before. Both were remarried, and there had been words between her and her mother. Of course, with her mother's holy rolling attitude and what goes on here in town, that's another story, John stated. You're wrong on that one, preacher, Chris interrupted. I have a great-grandmother in town, Storm asked. Unfortunately, yeah. My mother has issues with her, Chris admitted. Boy, oh boy, oy vey, does Nanny Esther have issues with that one? Graham rolled his eyes. Yes, she's a bit off, though. And we ain't talking about seeing flying saucers. Or ghosts. She attends weddings and funerals at all the churches, uninvited, and preaches a strange account of the Bible, that Yeshua is her husband, and she's waiting for him to return to her, John explained. Silver nodded, like Delta Dawn. Michelle's mother never remarried, or if she did, it wasn't long-lasting. She still does small jobs in house sitting. She's retired and has an efficiency apartment at Miss Pinky's. She's still here in town, very much so, and we try to keep Mama Esther and her as far apart as possible because of what she's pulled over your grandmother's father's family. John looked at him and took a little black book from his breast pocket to flip open. Your birthright. Michelle's father hasn't been in her life for years. She got involved with Eric Johansson. John stood when the back door of the kitchen was knocked on. That will be one of the boys. He left to answer it, leaving his congregation's address and information book on the table. Chris spoke. John's right. She took off with Eric. He was 15 years her junior. The idiot left Sandy and their 3 kids. Ghost was maybe 6, Casper 3, and Spirit was a newborn. He pointed to Silver. You and Emily took custody of them 2 years later when Sandy went into hospice. Wait a minute. Jensen, Lars, and Elkie? I remember playing with Elkie. Storm looked at Silver. Yes, you remember right. They lived with us before we moved into the B&B. When you were with Frenella, he nodded. Eric showed up 5 years ago. That's the case Alice handled for Ghost that we told you about. She wasn't with him. Silver looked over his shoulder at the 4 men who entered with Father John. The tea and coffee are over there. The quarterback just sacked himself. He turned back. Eric said she was in Phoenix, Arizona. He had to put all her stuff in storage because he and her had split, and he was going to come home for the kids. She wanted it stored in Trenton or somewhere, and he'd rented a U-Haul and dumped it all with Kathy to let her handle it. She was heading to Texas or somewhere with this high roller they'd met at a casino or wherever. That was 5 years now. Haven't seen hide nor hair of him since he lost the case to Ghost. Don't even know if he's in the area anymore. I mean, after all, his father owned his own trucking company, and he drove a rig for years. He could be anywhere. I don't think the company is in business anymore. Not after COVID put a grip on a lot of shit with the supply chains. The 4 men that walked in with Father John fixed their drinks. Dakota stepped around the table to look from one man to the next that gathered for breakfast. Gentlemen, I wish the ladies were still here for this statement. We have an issue, and I do not like what we found out. Pat looked up at him, at the man that was his son. Boy, the police chief blew out a breath. We're opening a new investigation into an old case of the deaths of the Papadopouloses and Carlson 4. In visiting new evidence supplied to us from a 9-year-old cold case and looking at the old evidence through new reasoning that involves the 12-ton elephant in this room, the one and only former Chief of Police Noel Franks really screwed up like a big dog and still doesn't want to admit anything about it. And it's a big-time F-up, I'll tell you that. He's also gone and disappeared, Jim, Chris's older son, put in. Hasn't reported to work in the last few days. Mrs. Fieldsome called and reported to us that he hasn't been in her boarding house for about a week. Seems he left for work last Monday, never showed at work, and never returned to the boarding house. I went out to check. All his personal items are gone. So, Thursday I put in for a freeze on his bank account, and he's considered a person of interest in this case. Richie sipped his coffee. Didn't have to do much with that. Turns out his account was closed a week ago Friday. He's gone. Where to, why, and how come are you questioning that are the questions that seek answers. Dakota fixed his coffee. The front door to the inn opened. Finish your breakfast. Bessie's school bus is pulling out of here in 5 for the bus shelter, and Storm will be off to register you for school. Emily walked in. Hi, boys. What's doing? And there we end our reading for today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have, press like and please decide to subscribe to The Mouse Says the Butler Didn't Do It. We will continue on to find out what other secrets the Manduala Foundation and the men and women of Manduala hold that Storm seeks. Thank you, and have a blessed day.